young pictures, I will say, proof that we were all young once, right? Right. We all have pictures. Okay, let me go ahead and give a house cleaning item here. I will be loud at times, and there I'm getting louder as we speak. And so at our advanced stages, and I include myself in that, it can be hard to hear sometimes. So just brace yourself and go for the ride. How about that? All right, Bob, Ray, Sally, Charles, John, can you hear me okay? Excellent. Your silence is said to consent. All right, Bob, you got the mic down there, but we're going to start. We're going to call it Ladies First night, and we're going to start with you, Sally. How's that? You okay with that? We're going to start with you. Is that okay? Okay. So Sally, my first question for you is, tell the audience exactly how old you were when you joined the Army.
I was 16.
That seems a tad young. But you're good. Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah. So it seems you were a tad young to get in the Army, weren't you?
Yes, I had to lie about my age.
Anybody here? There's a lot of that going around in World War II. How did it feel to be in the Army at such a young age, 16?
Well, at that time, we were all very patriotic. And I just felt like I had to join the Army or do something for my king and country.
And that you did. I want you to tell us a little bit more about your role in the Royal Signal Corps, kind of what you did, what they had you doing.
Yes, I was in the Royal Signal Corps, and I had to take messages. Well, first of all, I had to learn the Morse code and be able to edit the messages that I was getting. And I worked on a wireless or a radio and took messages from the headquarters. And at the time I was on the heavy artillery. And we were down in the, what did I call it yesterday?
The command post? The command post? The basement? The command post?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Were you in the command post? The command post in the basement?
Come on, post.
Come on. We all stand correct.
Take messages from the radio and decipher them and everything. And then they would take it to the plotters who were plotting the planes coming over from Germany. And then the plotters would okay everything and send it up to where the heavy artillery guns were. And they would tell them then to shoot the planes.
Yes, and you remember the artillery battery. What was the artillery battery you were a part of?
5-3.
Was it 539?
Yes.
Okay. I remember some things. All right, John, I want to come to you, my friend. Now, you said that you got in the paratroopers in World War II because they had lost so many men. Was that because of D-Day?
I don't know.
And I'm going to come over here by John and Charles. Was that because of D-Day? Is that why they lost so many men?
Yes, that's true. And consequently, they were taking volunteers. And so volunteered at that time, and I was informed that I was too small, much too small to get into this kind of an outfit. And I told him, I tell you what, I may be small, but I'm tough. And so I said, I tell you what we'll do. We'll go outside and have a fist fight. And if I win, I get in to the paratroops, and if I lose, I'm out. The guy,
Remember what he said to you?
yeah, I can't remember what he said.
It started with Shorty.
See,
It started with Shorty.
Shorty. God damn it.
That was not in the brochure. No, and that's okay. You told me that he said, all right, Shorty, if you want in that bad, you're in. And that's what...
That's what he said.
And then there were a couple of reasons why you wanted to get into paratroopers. What did they have that you wanted?
Oh, yeah. Number one is that they paid $50 more a month, which is a substantial fund at that particular time of the year. And I had one other.
It had something to do with boots.
Oh, yeah. You know, paratroops like to have nice shiny boots, and so I was wanted shiny boots. And I said, for example, and I showed them, they were not exactly paratroop boots, but they served the purpose at that particular time.
Well said, John. Well said. I think, let me just ask the question, when was the last time you wanted a job so bad you were willing to have a fist fight to get it? That's a fair question. Bob South, we come to you. You're far but near. So, Bob, we mentioned to the kids in the high school the other day, and I bet a lot of people here tonight used their phone, their GPS, to get here. But in World War II, there were no cell phones. There was no GPS. How in the world did you guys navigate all over the Pacific Ocean?
Well, you're right. We didn't have any GPS. We traveled with a navigator as part of our crew, and he would take shots with the instruments up through the top of the plane. We had a bubble that he could shoot through. But if it's nighttime and cloudy, he's not doing as much good because he can't shoot stars. In the daytime, we got pretty much the same effect. There's only a couple stars he can shoot, and that would be Venus and the sun, and that's not enough. So I remember leaving for the first time, leaving Oakland, California, and we had two ships. I was going to say anchored, but it was too deep, they couldn't anchor, but I guess they were twirling around in spots out there. know the longitude and latitude, and they had equipment that we could home off of. And that got us to Hawaii. But when you stop and think, that's the last piece of decent navigational equipment we would have. So our real navigation that we could depend on, or not really depend on, but the only thing that was real were the instructions when we left one island. The meteorology guys there would give us the forecasted winds. And that's all we had to go by. And our navigator would plot the course, and it would be using those winds that they gave him when we left. For instance, so we left the Philippines, Samar in the Philippines, and they said, here's what your winds are going to be, hopefully. And we navigated by what those predicted winds would be. And luckily they were normally pretty accurate. But you could get a wind shift out there and nobody would know it. So we really navigated by what one island told us the winds were going to be until we got to the next island.
And we've talked about that. If you've looked at a globe, the Pacific is so vast that one wrong turn and you would never be seen or heard from again. Run out of fuel and they would go down on course. So a remarkable feat in World War II. Bob, I want to stay with you for a minute. Where were you on D-Day, June 6, 1944?
I'm sorry.
D-Day in the Pacific compared to D-Day in Europe. We were in communication all the time with what was going on in Europe, but it just seemed a different war almost. But when D-Day was declared in Europe, I really don't remember just where I was, but I'm sure I was flying over the Pacific somewhere. But we experienced so many D-Days in the Pacific. And when they took one island, that'd be a D-Day on that baby. And then we took another island, we got another D-Day. And so it was, the comparison was unusual.
Many D-Days in the Pacific, which many people don't think about. Thank you, Bob. Ray Shockley. Hello, my friend.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Oh, we're good then. All right. Ray, you were on the destroyer, the USS Macomb. And my question to you is, where were you on D-Day, June 6, 1944?
I was in southern France in an invasion, and we kind of a mock pull the Germans away from going on with me.
Okay, were you guys able to hear that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so because was your operation a decoy for the other landings?
It helped.
It helped, yeah. And another question I'd like to ask you is, I don't think we included it in your video, but the USS Macomb was a destroyer, and then they turned it into a minesweeper. And so you fought in the European theater, and then they sent you to the Pacific.
Right.
And so you experienced D-Day in Europe, but then you experienced another D-Day like what Bob talked about. And where did they send you in the Pacific?
You know, before we got shipped to there, we went from Toronto, Italy, towards France. And on the way, we picked up this German submarine that had been trailing us. We chased it for 3 days, 72 hours. Finally, we brought it up off the coast of that Spain there. We come up, and there comes a guy on the top side with a white flag. And what are you gonna do? Me, I blew them away because they had some 4 American ships. Anyway, then we just waited, and I guess I got the word to evacuate themselves. So another ship, the Ellison, picked up 52 prisoners, if I remember right. They picked up the prisoners, and then when they were gone, we used it for guns, so just made nothing out of it. Shot it up, sunk it, 616 went down.
And the picture was actually the captain of that U-boat in his video. So that was the captain the day that they brought it up in the Mediterranean. And then, Ray, they sent you over to the Pacific, and you were part of a big D-Day there. Where did they send you? What battle in the Pacific?
We went to Okinawa. They set up radar picket ships all around the island. We swept mines at Sagami Bay, all around the island, and then they assigned us a radar picket ship. And I can't remember exactly how many, but we shot down a lot of planes. That one valve plane got through to our number 3 gun house.
I know. Yeah. Let me help you with that, Ray. 80 years later, the memories are still fresh. And Ray reported, Ray, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember your story correctly, you were in the radar room and you were supposed to have gone out to that gun mount. You were supposed to do a shift change with your friend. His name was Jim.
Yeah.
But somehow you guys were late in making that shift change. And Ray is here tonight telling us about his friend Jim, perhaps rather than the other way around. And yeah, Ray, I appreciate just how much emotion is still connected with that. And you had the privilege of writing Jim's parents, is that right? You sent them a letter.
Yeah.
Is that right? And did you tell us that that letter got to them before the government informed his parents?
When?
Did your letter arrive before the government got to Jim's parents to tell them?
No, he was classified missing in action, and they didn't know how. So I told them about the gun.
Yeah. I hear you. How the kamikaze got through, and you'll remember that so many in World War II that they simply got letters of missing in action, and you know they had no way of knowing things, and sometimes it was just to keep information hidden. But Ray's letter came through, and I remember you telling me, Ray, that the parents, Jim's parents, were so grateful that you had sent that letter. Otherwise, they wouldn't have known for who knows how long what happened to their son. And so that was a very powerful moment, Ray, in your story, and I appreciate you telling us about it. Thank you, Ray. Charles, do you know the old saying, the last shall be first? You know the saying, the last shall be first?
Yeah.
Well, we got to you. All right?
I can see why. The government is paying me $100 per day for my hearing loss. I might tell you that for starters. Gunfire.
Well, that's a bonus, right? That is. And so, here's my question to you. Charles, where were you on D-Day, June 6, 1944?
Well, the best of my knowledge and remembrance, I was in Fort Hood, Texas, south of Mason-Dixon. And I found out why everything was down there. The it was hot. In those days, there was no air conditioning. People would pass out in the barracks. And I spent the whole summer there until at the end of it, we went on bivouac. It had not rained all summer, and for 2 weeks we were in top tents, and it rained, and the tent barely slowed the rain down, I think. And so I found out about the South there. I've never been in the South before, and I got on a bus going to Killeen, Texas there for one weekend, and a black fellow got on and sat down right behind the bus driver. You know what happened next. He said, "This bus is not going to move until you go to the back of the bus." He got up and walked to the back of the bus. In fact, I don't remember seeing any black people in Fort Hood in the paratroopers. And so at the end of the summer, we, most of them, this was an IRTC camp, that stands for Infantry Replacement Training Center. Most of them went overseas to replace fallen soldiers. Some of the fellows said, "We're going over to Fort Benning and get into paratroopers." Said they got fancy uniforms, and the girls like those. So that sounded good to me. So off I went to them, and they had the same uniforms that I had. At first they had gabardine uniforms, real nice looking. But now we were all the same. So anyway, it's a 4-week course, and last week we made a parachute jump. One got our silver wings for 5 jumps. One of them was a night jump, I recall, and so I got ear sick. I always got motion sickness, and that just wasn't good. But they picked out some people now at the end of the class. There were 1,000 people in each class, weekly class that came, and they needed 15 people for parachute riggers to repair chutes, 15 for most demolition people, 15 for communication. So they picked me out of 1,000 to go to parachute rigger school. So I was doing that now for about 3 months till Christmas, and got to go home and be with my girlfriend there over Christmas, and then we got back and put us on the Queen Elizabeth, 30,000 of us, and we went over to Europe. Now the Queens could outrun the submarines, so we didn't have any accompaniment, and no destroyers. So when we got there in the upper Scotland there, we took a train down to Southampton, the very southern tip of England, where somebody got the measles, and they quarantined all of us for 2 weeks in barbed wire, gave us the opportunity to go out every night through the holes and check out the town.
So I told Charles we're going to put a pause there. There's a million stories. And for those of us that never served in the military, these are the reasons why. So thank you. Thank you. And John, I just want to say, between you and Charles, between you getting in for the shiny boots and $50 and you getting in for the girls, the paratroopers had it going on, right? Thank you for sharing stories that many of those I've never heard before, so that's a treat. Charles, I appreciate that. Sally, ladies first again, I'm coming back to you. And so what I want to ask you about, Sally, is we saw in your video that on June 6, 1944, you saw the planes going over, but a special occasion was happening. Can you tell the audience what you were doing when D-Day happened, what that special occasion was?
I was on my honeymoon. And during the day, we heard this loud noise, and we rushed outside, and there was hundreds and hundreds of planes going over. And they were going over to Germany and France and the rest of Europe. And it was so loud. And this went on for hours. And my husband said, the war has started.
And I asked you, Sally, I said, did you know about D-Day, that it was going to happen?
Well, we knew something was going on, but I'm sure if D-Day was going to happen that soon, they would not have allowed me to go home and get married.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to come back to you in just a minute. Mr. Roberts, I presume. I would like to talk to you again. There's a couple of really important stories in your service that I would like the audience to know about. And one is that you fought at Bastogne in the Battle of the Bulge. And if people remember, that was one of the worst winters that had ever been seen in Europe. And something happened to you there. Can you tell us what happened to you?
Well, number one, it was thought that my feet were frozen. They weren't totally frozen. However, they were at a certain point that they were either had to be treated or they would be frozen. And I was then
They shipped you to a hospital?
oh, yeah. I ended up going to a hospital, and while I was in there, one of the nurses said, there's a guy in another floor that looks just exactly like you. And I said, well, is he with the 2nd Armored? He's a tank driver. Lo and behold, it was my twin brother. So we were very anxious to get together. As it turned out, the war didn't let us get together until we got discharged back in the United States.
2 floors apart, and they took John and shipped him out. They were that close to seeing each other. But that's a common story in World War II, where people weren't reunited until they returned back to the States. And that's remarkable. And John, there's another important story that we saw in your video, and that's that you were a guard at Dachau concentration camp. And can you tell the audience why they had you all guarding the camp?
Number one, the enemy indicated that there was nothing unusual about the war going on and what's happening. Well, it turns out that there was a concentration camp with gas chambers, and they were active while we were there. So we were then required to guard that area and prevent them from destroying the gas chambers and additional enemy presence.
And John, you reported as well that in your feature, if you go watch John's full feature, you reported that people have said that they believe the Holocaust didn't happen, but you are one that can vouch for it.
Yes, indeed. Having looked at the ovens and other debris, we knew and could spread the word that there was a terrible, terrible situation there.
Thank you, John, for sharing that with us. Bob, can you tell the audience how difficult it was to ferry out those wounded from the islands? I know you were in the pilot's seat up front, but surely you must have seen, as you mentioned in your video, just the condition of our soldiers in those campaigns. How difficult was it for you guys to be in those operations of taking the wounded out from the islands?
Well, it was difficult because you had to witness some guys that say just came off of Iwo Jima, and boy, they were shot up. And if you recall, the ground on Iwo Jima was just volcanic ash. And those guys dug in so hard to get out of machine gun fire from the Japanese. And they were covered with volcanic ash. And we loaded them on the plane, and we could stack them 4 high. We had the litter cases, and they fell down from the fuselage, and then we had 9 bays like that. So they were full, and they were very severely wounded. And we wanted to get them back to Honolulu just as quick as we could. Whenever we had a shipment that had litter cases, we had to have a nurse travel with us too, an Navy nurse. It seemed like her main job was just trying to keep them as restful as she possibly could, which to me, as ignorant as I was, keeping shot up with morphine, and they were pretty much zombies all the way. But I asked one of the nurses, I said, can't you clean them up a little? I mean, they still had the volcanic ash all over their face, all over their hands and arms, and she said, that takes time. And no, we haven't got time. Says, we got to get them to Honolulu as quick as we can. We haven't got time to clean them up or anything else. I just got to keep them restful for the whole trip. So let's get back there and get these engines roaring. So that impressed me as quite an ordeal. The suffering I went through.
Well said, Bob. I'd like to ask you one more question. This is a question that could represent all of you on the panel tonight. Your generation has been called the greatest generation. How do you feel about that? Your generation has been called the greatest generation. How do you feel about that?
Well, I guess we're talking about Tom Brokaw. That book he wrote about the greatest generation. I can't say it was the greatest generation. It was a needed necessity to form one hell of a good generation, I'll say that. And I think you could say it was the greatest, but it was a necessity at that time to be the greatest.
Thank you for that, because I would like to share that that's probably the best explanation I've ever heard from a World War II soldier, airman, sailor, Marine, British servant of the greatest generation, and how your generation feels about that. Ray Shockley, I'd like to ask you one more question. Can you tell the audience what it was like to actually witness the Japanese surrender in Tokyo Bay after all that you had seen and been through?
Well, it's just something wonderful. Got to watch from the big lookout station that had the big scope on, and I watched the Japanese surrender at that table, but I watched the sailors come in and put down mats and their equipment and stuff that they were going to use to sign. And they signed it, and I couldn't visualize really the war being over. Because we were still doing the same thing months later, sweet mines and everything. So you had to have so many points to get discharged. I think I had 32 or 34, whatever it was. And that took from that come up to February to get discharged. And really, I didn't feel that we would have a real peace with the Japanese, no matter what. I wouldn't trust them nowhere, no way. And I always look for a comeback at us. I look for the booby trappers going into the Tokyo Bay. But we lucked out. I lucked out 2 or 3 times.
I believe they call that a cat with 9 lives. Yeah. Thank you, Ray. Thank you for sharing that with us. Charles, what was it like to write a letter home to your dad on Hitler's stationery?
Well, I thought it was a fitting end to the war. And the way I came about all this was kind of miraculous. I ended up in Berchtesgaden in Hitler's office the day the war ended. And there had been thousands of people through there before me. So I went out in the hall, and it looked like a hope chest there. I raised the lid. It was half full of Hitler stationery, which I promptly liberated. So I thought it was a fitting end to it. And I slept that night, incidentally, right-hand man. He was a lawyer who reviewed all the documents before Hitler saw them, and had a plush carpet there, and I picked the lock on his desk that night, and the only thing he had left in it was a seating arrangement for a 1938 banquet before the war, with Hitler at the head of the table, all the Nazis there, their wives, their children. This was in honor of an Austrian named von Horthy, and so I later occupied Austria for the summer. And I kind of wondered why they did until I realized that they all spoke German and they welcomed Hitler in their country.
You know, Charles, as you were talking, it just occurred to me for the first time. When you were at Berchtesgaden in the Reich Chancellery, you both liberated and occupied, right? You liberated the stationery, occupied the office.
They wouldn't let me in the Eagle's nest because it had been bombed. So now people have sent me pictures, Germans, for what, to get my signature on them. Two Germans sent me pictures for my, and one guy from Austria sent it to me, and another guy came that was writing the book about the greatest generation that had me sign it for it. Gave me $100 to sign, gave me $1,000 to sign his photo.
So let's just say that anybody that got Charles' signature tonight, hang on to that. That one's free. If you come to his place, it's going to cost you $1,000. I guarantee you. Charles, one last thing about that letter to Hitler. The audience may have picked up on it, but what was the date on that letter?
I think it was May the 8th, 1945.
And what's significant about that day?
It was the day that the Hitler, the people surrendered.
Maybe we should all say together, poetic justice. Thank you, Charles. And what do you say? Since we started with ladies first, we'll go with ladies last. So Sally, one more question for you. You were not the only one that served in World War II in your family. Can you tell us about your brother?
Yes. My brother was a pilot in our air. He flew on, or he was a pilot for the Lancaster bomber. And when he went over to Germany to bomb, on his way back home, he was shot down by the Germans and over in France. And he is buried there along with his crew. Sean and I went there last year for the 80th reunion.
So our theme tonight was 80 years, D-Day through the eyes of the greatest generation. But there was another 80th last year, and that was the 80th anniversary of your brother Ernest being shot down in April of 1944. And so one time an Iwo Jima veteran called me and he said, hey, he was the only man who walked on the island and walked off out of his 30-man platoon, not killed or wounded. And he called me and he said, hey, would you drive with me up to Delaware? I found my medic who was on Iwo Jima with me, and I'd like you to go and do a video on him. Would you go with me? And I said, well, Ed, let me think about it for a minute. Drive halfway across the country with an Iwo Jima veteran to go see another Iwo Jima veteran. I said, yeah, I'll do that. And last year, when Sally, in a similar situation, I was over at her house and she said, "Will you go to France with me?" No, right? I said, "Well, let me think about it." And so she was invited by, there were 3 villages in eastern France, and they still had her address because we have pictures of Sally in France 30 years ago. And that was the last time she was there at her brother's graveside. And they still had her contact, so they invited her to come over. And she was the only foreigner that attended the 80th anniversary event of her brother's death and the crew and other British airmen that were shot down in that area. And I'm telling you, she was the Queen of England. For more reasons than one. And so we went over there and were able to joyfully celebrate that. And just a point of interest, we went from Paris, got in a little car, and drove to a town called Saint-Dizier. And I'm walking outside of the hotel and I see all these military jets flying over. And come to find out, Saint-Dizier was occupied by the Germans in World War II. It was out of that aerodrome in that city that her brother was shot down. That's where the fighters came from, because it's very close to where they were shot down. And so we thought, as a little treat, we'd just show you just a short clip of Sally in France last year. So if you'll turn your attention to the screen, we'll take a look at that.
Here we go. And that was Sally's brother Ernest. Incidentally, the pictures, miraculously, I don't know how so many came back from World War II, but those were the pictures the day that her brother and crew were buried. That was actually the crew and her brother there. And so we're going to take a few minutes here. We thought, you know, if this is the only chance we get to pass this way, why not take a few minutes and open it up to the audience? Any of you that would like to ask questions of any one of the veterans, you can ask the question. Emma with Valor Partners is going to come out with a microphone, and if you'll relate, can I steal that from you, Bob? Thank you, sir. She is going to bring the mic out, and if anybody has a question, I'll relay the question. And we'll relay the question up to the veterans in the event that they don't hear. But I'll give you a shot on the mic to see if you can project and get your question asked. So be thinking of that as Emma comes. Anybody at all have a question you would like to ask one of the veterans?
So it's a question addressed to any of you, all of you. We see pictures of you, we see you, we've seen the videos of each of you. To me, you haven't aged a day. So tell us, what's the secret to your youth? Why is it that you look as beautiful today and as handsome today as you did then?
Did you all hear that? Okay, so the question is, you look like you haven't aged a day. What's the secret to staying young and beautiful as you have? Sally, that just seems like a question for you. What'd you say, Ray?
I say, don't count them.
Don't. That's actually good advice. Anybody else like to take a stab at that? John's backing off. Did you, Charles, the question was, you guys look like you haven't aged today. What's the secret to keeping your youthfulness and your beauty?
Mine, according to my doctor, was that I have good genetics. I have a 102-year-old grandmother, and now I'm 100 and a half.
Well, there it is. Good genetics. The rest of us, not so lucky. There you go. Another question. Somebody else. Yes, so right down here. Right, let's go with this young man right here, and then we'll come over to Logan.
Do you ever regret joining?
Did you hear that? The young man asked, did you ever regret joining the military?
Did I ever will?
Did you ever regret joining the military?
Oh, no.
Were you ever sorry?
No. I was so patriotic. I had to do something for my country.
Anybody else? Bob, Charles, Ray? Were you ever sorry that you joined the military?
Oh, I've got no mind. No, I was never sorry. It was something that you really had to do at that time. And I had a choice. I wanted to be in the Navy, not the Army. I chose the Navy, and I tried to be a Navy pilot, which I succeeded at. And I liked it enough that after 4 years of active duty, much of it in the Pacific, I stayed in another 16 years in the reserves, so I got 21 years in the Navy. And so, no, I never regretted joining the Navy.
Anybody else? Were you sorry that you got in the military?
I think when I was so damn seasick.
Then you were sorry. I want to ask John. John, same question to you. Were you ever sorry that you got in the military?
No, especially when I came out alive, but the fact that it was America, and it just seemed like it was vital that we protect America. And so I think for the most part, both soldiers were glad that we won the war and that they participated.
Yes, the gentleman here, and then we have a woman over there.
I'm Larry Nelson, a retired Navy pilot. And Bob, I have flown the DC-6 and the DC-4. I was in the Navy in the 60s and the 70s. I've witnessed flying across the Pacific with the sextant he was talking about. Anyway, I was born 2 months after the war started in Europe. I lived straight south of Smoky Hill Air Force Base, and I saw plenty of military airplanes. Bob, where'd you go to flight training?
Did you hear that, Bob? Okay. So he is a fellow Navy pilot who flew the D6 and the D4, and he talked to us about his story. He wanted to know where you went to flight training.
To begin flight training, was in the old Yellow Peril. Yep. And the biplane, open cockpit, and that was at Hutchinson, Kansas. Went from there to pre-flight school, Del Monte, California, and then it was back to Hutchinson, and then on to Pensacola.
My first vision of Navy airplane was Hutchinson, Kansas. My aunt and uncle lived there. Anyway, interesting thing is, I was 4 years old, living on a farm. My dad and I went to Camp Phillips, Kansas, picked up 6 German prisoners. There were 1,500 POW camps in the U.S. It was harvest time. We didn't have help. I went to the field on a wagon, had a toy gun. As we got up to the prisoners, they all put their hands up. We went to lunch. My mom cooked. The guard hung his gun up, and we all had fried chicken. They had such a good deal. Anyway, and actually one of those kids was in my grade school class.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Bob, he was telling us the story that they needed farm help, so they went to Kansas and got some German prisoners who came and helped on the farm. So, that's a bonus. That's a bonus for you too. Okay, another question. I know we had one over here. Right there? Yeah.
All right. Part of my question was already answered by Ray and Charles when he talked about V-Day, VAJ. But I want to know from Bob, John, and Sally, that when you guys experience either VE Day or VJ Day, do you guys have any remembrance of that? Any feelings of relief that you guys didn't have to fight anymore after when the war was over?
Okay, I got it. Bob, when VJ Day happened, did you have any relief that the war was over?
Is this the VJ? Yes. At the Japanese? Oh, sure, there was a relief. Yeah, I was glad to see it over. I didn't want it to go on a bit longer. So, yeah.
Sally, question to you. Were you relieved when the war was over? Were you relieved when the war was over?
I can't think that I was pleased, but
Well, that's good enough. John, same question to you. Were you relieved when the war was over?
Indeed, we're very pleased to see the war to be over. The Japanese and the Germans had retired, and consequently we were going to be able to go home and start our lives all over again. But we definitely were proud that America won that war and did it with gusto.
Well said. We have a couple questions over here. Yes, ma'am.
So we have a history of family that have either been enlisted or volunteered, and my husband was a 74 high school graduate, and that's about the time that the draft ended. And in subsequent years, do you believe when you were drafted that your life serving made you a better person and impacted your life such that you feel service to the country is beneficial to all, whether it be men and or women? And does it constitute or institute more pride in the United States?
Sure. No, I appreciate that so much. For time's sake, I may address the first part of your question. Do any of you, and Sally, I realize you're still a British citizen. You're not an American citizen, though she's lived in Shawnee, Kansas for 30 years. Do any of you American veterans believe that they should reinstitute the draft today?
Yes.
Okay. Why do you feel that way, Sally?
What was that?
Why do you feel that way?
I don't know why I feel
Yeah.
that,
That's fair.
but I do think they should be.
Okay. Thank you.
I think it would be good for them.
Mm.
I know when I was in the Army, they taught me a trade. And it helped me when I got out of the Army. And I retired at 65, doing the same thing, more or less, what I did in the Army.
Thank you. One more crack at it. Bob, Ray, Charles, Bob. Bob, Ray, Charles, John, any of you feel like that they should reinstitute the draft? The military draft? Yeah.
Yeah, I would be for it, because I've always maintained that upon graduation from high school, I've always thought 2 years of military training would be a good thing for everybody. I've always thought that was necessary. Maybe the only one, but that's my opinion.
All right, well said. I think we have time for one more question. There was, right here. Okay, no, let's start with this young man. 2 more, right here, and then we'll go to Chris.
I believe that I can speak for everybody in here. Thank you all for your service and what you brought to your countries. Thank you.
This young man was thanking you for your service. Yeah. And last one right here, Mr. Crowley.
My father was picked as a liaison by General Gavin for the Victory Parade down Fifth Avenue, which you mentioned and showed pictures of. It was the first victory parade since Pershing's march after World War I. And there were 4 million people gathered to see the parade as the 82nd Airborne marched down Fifth Avenue. It's a very famous video. Were any of you able to attend that or see that in the newsreels when it happened?
Okay, and I think we have, if I'm not mistaken, we have 2 veterans, both Charles and John. You both participated in the Victory Parade in New York. I know you did, Charles. Did you? John, can you tell us about that?
That was, yes. Of course, we went overseas in a less than a fancy boat. Came back on the Queen Mary, which of course was one of the premier liners at that particular time. And we were all very well accepted by the people of New York, and
It's getting colder.
and so when we were marched on the Victory Parade down Fifth Avenue in New York, you couldn't as per another proud American soldier.
Well, we would like to thank all of our veterans here tonight. You all did a wonderful job, and it's a great privilege to have spent this time with you and to hear from you. And we have a few closing remarks right now, and so I'm going to invite, yes ma'am. We have a late-breaking question, late-breaking news. Yes, let's do that. Yeah.
I am Ray's daughter-in-law, and these are his grandkids. But I don't think his grandkids know this. Ray, can you tell them what happened to the minesweeper after you were done sweeping mines in Tokyo Bay?
I can hear you up here.
So, Winnie is asking, can you tell the audience what happened to the USS Macomb, the minesweeper, after it was done?
Well, we let the Japanese use it to sweep more mines.
It was nice, and it begs the question, have you ever known a nation that defeated its enemies and then turned around and rebuilt them?
Not really.
No apologies to say that this is the greatest nation on the face of the earth with its own issues and problems, but compared to everything else, going all the way back to World War II, what nation does that? And so at this time, thank you, and I'm going to turn it back over to Kelly Campbell Goodnow with Valor Partners.
John, Charles, Sally, Ray, and Bob, thank you so much. It is always such an honor and privilege to hear your stories. 3 of my own children are the same ages that you all were. My 16-year-old daughter's here, and Sally, to think of her doing what you did just blows me away. I hope we all find ourselves with some renewed perspective tonight. I want to thank, as we close, I just want to thank the faculty and students, our wonderful students that helped us tonight. Partnering with Rockhurst has been a blessing. And again, thank you to our friends at Ad Astra and GEHA and Bank of Labor, the Kincaid Group, UMB, and Garmin for sponsorships that allow us to make service stories accessible to our whole community. And Sean, bravo. We are beyond grateful to partner with Sean and Patriot Features. The clips you all saw tonight are just a taste of the full documentaries that Sean has. That he has produced, and I think he has produced well over 109, 10. Do you know the exact sum about that? And you can, if you enjoyed these tonight, there are many more online you can go see. They should be heard and shared and learned from. And that's at patriotfeatures.org. It's just a beautiful archive serving to educate our community and our nation and our future generations that I'm so happy to see here tonight. So that we may never forget these sacrifices that have been made for the cause of freedom. We must remember that freedom and the security that we so easily can take for granted has been fought for and died for and sacrificed for by the less than 1% of our population that chooses to wear the uniform. The other 99% of us, I hope, are grateful and inspired to steward service and sacrifice in our own lives, knowing that we owe our service members and their families a debt of gratitude we can never fully repay. But we can certainly try. And that's what Valor Partners is doing, joining with schools like Rockhurst to provide scholarship funds for the children and spouses of our 100% disabled and deceased veterans. They are known as Chapter 35 students. And as of today, we have 38 partnerships making our scholarships available at 57 colleges, universities, and technical schools across 13 states. As Al said before, every dollar given to our scholarship program is doubled by our partnership match, and every scholarship is given to a student with unmet financial burdens who, without our help, without your help, might not achieve the education they dreamed of. Too many are one rent payment, one broken down car, one sick child, one more burdensome student loan away from dropping out. They can make the grades, but can't make the payments. And when they've carried a heavy burden of sacrifice enough already, that shouldn't be a barrier to their success. So financial support for college is really the least we can do in bringing hope and opportunity to our military families. And tonight we honor those families. And so if you're comfortable doing so, I want to ask our military and veterans and also our military spouses and children, if you would please stand so we can thank you. If you'd like to support Valor Scholars in Kansas City and beyond tonight, there's a QR code on the screen that will take you to our website. You can learn more. The need is great, and I can tell you your gifts are truly making a difference. So at this time, I'd like to ask our wonderful Rockford students to come on back up and escort our veterans from the stage. And as they do, will you please join me in one last standing ovation for our greatest generation?